Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Introspection from Grief to Growth. I'm your host, Amy Lindner Lesser, and I am so excited today. I have one of my favorite people on as a guest. Sandy Alemian is someone I met, I think it was about 15 years ago. We were both working with a coach, and it was my first time at one of the retreats, and it was her last. And I don't believe in coincidences. So, by divine synchronicity, I happened on the table that she was sitting at with a few other women at lunchtime. And we started talking, and I was fascinated. And through the years, I have been following Sandy. I've taken a course of hers. Um, I have gone to her for a reading. She is a multi-talented, amazing woman who has taken a lot of life quakes and turned them into such wonderful examples and ways to look at life and to grow and to see the positive. She is an inspirational speaker, an author of at least 4, possibly more books. She is also a medium, and she provides insights and guidance through messages that she receives from spirit, whether they're from guides, angels, souls on the other side, and some directly from God. And she's also a certified bereavement facilitator, and she can help people where they feel stuck. I'm going to say it started a little bit earlier, but Sandy lost one child at 31 days old, her infant daughter, and that's when the conversations with God really got strong. And she realized that she had a calling, that there was a job for her to do. So in her work, she blends wisdom and gentle humor, sometimes not so gentle humor, as a voice for spirit and God. Her messages are always healing, uplifting, and life-altering. She's also a transformational coach, help you find your voice, let go of fear, and help you reconnect with your authentic self. I've had Sandy do readings, and I think many of you have heard my story of selling my inn when I didn't know it was for sale. That came from a message I got from Sandy in November of I believe it was 2019. And the message was from my father's father, my paternal grandfather, who said, "You better clean up your act, clean up your office, because you're going to be out of here in a year." And I laughed because I didn't think that was going to happen. It wasn't something that I was planning. I loved what I was doing. And sure enough, in December of 2020, somebody knocked on my door and asked if I wanted to sell the inn. So let me welcome Sandy to our show. Everybody grab a beverage, have a seat, and come enjoy our conversation. Welcome to Introspection, the podcast about moving from grief to growth. I'm Amy Lindner Lesser, your host. Introspection started out as a podcast about hospitality, innkeeping, and innkeepers. After about a year, I realized that my life and interests have morphed from hospitality to helping others navigate from grief and loss to growth and living. In this new version of Introspection, I will be talking about my personal experiences with loss, and there are quite a few, what I've learned along the way through my professional training, as well as from my coaching experiences. I'll also be bringing in guests to share interesting ideas. So grab a beverage, find a comfy place, take a deep breath, and listen in.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Sandy. It's so nice to have you here.
I was
You,
just listening to everything you said. I'm like, oh my goodness. Wow, I did that? Really? Wow. Thank you. That was beautiful.
you did, and it didn't even dawn on me until maybe a year after I sold, and I was reading through my notes, and I saw that, and I went, "Holy crap!" I
And
can't believe that.
can I just make a point for everyone who's listening? Because sometimes people are afraid to have, a message from spirit because they're afraid of what spirit would say. Spirit only does anything from love. It I'm sure they said to you, clean up your act in the most loving of ways.
You know what? It may not have been so loving. It may have been like, when I look around what my office looked like at that point, it was a disaster. There were boxes everywhere, there were papers everywhere. It was one of those places that nobody ever came into my inner sanctum because I was embarrassed about how it looked. And so it was, I'm sure that he said it with love. I know my grandfather loved me, but he also was somebody with a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, clean up your act.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you know what's funny? I don't often remember what I say during a session with someone. Like I'll see someone, I don't know, 2 or 3 months later, or I'll go to their home for a small group and they're like, do you remember when you said this to me? I'm like, no, I don't. Because when I'm doing my work, Amy, I'm not focused on I'm all focused on the realm of spirit, which is a different frequency. And when I come out of that, I don't typically retain it. I will retain funny stories or I'll retain those powerful, like, whoa, that was amazing. And I'll say, someone, please write that down because that was really good. Like, so I get a lot of these powerful insights, but I don't typically remember the day-to-day things that spirit will say.
I think that's probably true for most of us. I know when I give a lecture or a talk, it's not canned. I don't memorize it and speak. And if somebody said to me afterwards, what was it that you said about blah, blah, blah? I have no idea because it flowed. And I do believe that the divine was flowing through me.
And it's not something like when I go to someone's house or even when I work with someone privately, it's not like when I show up at someone's house, they're like, who's here? Like, who's, I'm like, I don't know, but your living room is really, really pretty. I'm not always open and receiving messages from spirit. I'm always connected. I think we're all always connected to the energy of God and spirit and our angels. But for me, I have to get quiet and it's like I tune into a different frequency, and it can only happen in this moment. It can only happen right here, right now. And so it's like that information that just flows in the moment. And you got to be present for it, but you also have to be open for it. And I believe we are all we all have the ability to tune in. Someone asked me recently, they said, do you think it's a gift or a talent? And I said, I don't know that it's a gift. I believe it's a talent that I've developed because I had to, and I needed it for myself. But I believe that we all have the capacity because we all are spirit. That's what we are. We have this clunky, awkward body thing, but who we truly are is spirit.
And I love that.
Yeah, me
I
too.
mean, I think we all have the gift. It's how we choose to use it, whether we want to accept that we have it and develop it, that it's there, but it's more latent in some people.
Amy, I see a lot of women because I work primarily with women, and I see so many women who are in pain. And if you look at a lot of Facebook groups that are focused on grief, and loss, there's so much pain. I was just looking at one this morning. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much heaviness in this group because everyone seems to be focusing on the loss, the sorrow, the grief, the loss, the sorrow, the grief, the loss, the sorrow, the grief. And that's a heavy energy. And I agree, we have to go through that. But I want to say it's not a but, it's an and. It's that and there's opportunities for growth, and there's a spiritual connection that is there for us, that is waiting for us to tune into it. And without that, someone can get very much stuck in their pain and their loss and their grief. And if someone's focusing on the pain, the loss, and the sorrow and the grief, they won't be aware of spirit, spirit's messages, or spirit's loving energy wanting to heal them. They won't be aware of it because they're in a different vibrational frequency. It would be like trying to clap like this. You're missing it because you're keeping yourself in a different frequency.
Mhm. My first experience with feeling my husband was 2 nights after he passed. It was my birthday. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was awake and in the bathroom. And my bathroom at the time was it was large, and it was a strange layout. It's sort of like a J shape. So you walk in at the top of the J, you can't see my hand, and then you come down and the toilet is over here. But there's no way that from being on the commode, you could reach the light switches. And all of a sudden, the overhead light went off. And I had never felt this way before, never believed in any of this. And the light went off, and very calmly I said, "Steve, I love you. I miss you. Turn the damn light on." And the light went right back on. And I still get chills when I talk about it. And there was no doubt in my mind that it was him.
Love
It
that.
didn't it didn't connect until someone said to me, "Amy, it was your birthday. He was wishing you a happy birthday," because he wasn't there physically to be able to do that.
That's beautiful.
And then I
And
realized that he does, he is there.
yeah,
He just left his body.
exactly. That's all that death is. Death is simply, I have freed myself from my body. So we like I said before, we are spirit. We are always spirit. Sometimes we have a body attached to it. So and it's spirit a lot lately has been saying things like, your life is like a little drop of water compared to the ocean. And the ocean is like the energy of our expansive spirit and the energy of spirit itself. And when we're in that little teeny tiny drop of water, we get so scared and anxious, and we think that, oh my God, this life is so big. This life, what if this life ends, or what if that person dies? And meanwhile, spirit's like, oh, you have no idea. You have no idea what you're going into, the expansiveness, the love and the light and the healing and the peace that you are going to be into. And we don't have to die in order to feel that. I want to say that again. We don't have to die. We don't have to leave our body in order to feel the expansiveness and the love and the healing and the light of our own spirit. We just have to learn how to tune in. And I think that's, if people don't know how to do that, again, they're going to stay stuck in their pain for a lot longer than they need to.
I think that's a good segue into how did all of this start for you?
Yeah, so I never thought I would be doing this work, Amy. I had my first daughter, Ariana, and then I had two miscarriages, and then I got pregnant with my second daughter, Talia, and she ended up having, it was a perfectly normal pregnancy and delivery and everything. She was 6 pounds 8 ounces, and they found that she was having some what they thought were seizures, and they said seizures are common in newborns, so we're not too concerned. They sent her up to the NIC unit, the neonatal intensive care unit at Beth Israel, where she spent the next her entire life of 31 days, and they kept running tests to see what was going on with her. And ultimately what they found was she had some neurological thing where her brain would have a seizure, and then there was no normal brain activity. So they said to us 2.5 weeks in, they said, if she survives this newborn period, and that's a big if, she will never be able to walk, talk, eat, breathe, communicate, smile, laugh, nothing. So back then, I mean, I've always been a pretty positive person, and I knew I could make her better. I knew if we prayed hard enough for her, I knew if I sent her enough positive energy, I knew we could make her better. And my prayers at the time were, God, you have to make her better. Didn't quite know what God was, but I just knew that there was something called God, and I knew I needed it big time. I'm like, you like begging, you have to make her better. It's the only way I'll be okay. Well, she ended up passing at 31 days old, and it brought me it brought me to that moment, Amy, of I can't do this. I can't do this. It's too hard. I can't do this. And I've had those moments. I had those moments many times then, and I've had moments like that throughout my life since. And it was one of those moments 2.5 weeks after Talia had passed. And I was just, when you go through a grief so deep, there are moments you don't even want to be here. There are moments you don't even want to be in your own skin anymore. Like I didn't want to be me. I felt fat because I just had a baby, but I didn't have a baby to show for it. So that particular day, Ari was my first daughter. Ari was at one of my sister's houses. My husband at the time was at work, and one of my sisters called me up and she said, "How you doing?" And I said, "I'm not having a good day." And she said, "Why don't you go for a walk? That might make you feel better." So I took this I did this 4 mile walk that I'd done many, many times, and I'm crying through the whole walk, secretly hating everybody that I saw driving in a car going by me who looked happy. I'm like, how can anybody be happy when my life is completely inside out and upside down? Quarter of a mile before I got home, there was an 18-wheeler coming towards me. And I distinctly remember, if I just step off this curb, I will be out of my pain. I will be with Talia, and I will know everything. Everything will make sense. And I wasn't in that moment, I was not thinking about Rich, my husband at the time, or Ariana, or my sisters, my mom, my dad. I wasn't thinking about that. All I was thinking about was, I need to get out of this pain. Something kept me from stepping off the curb. I got home. My sister called me again. She said, "Did that help?" And I said, "It really didn't." So she said, "Why don't you write, Sandy? Because your writing usually helps you to feel better." Now, backstory to that, I'd been writing with my angels for about 5 years already. Not once was I warned, hey, this is what you're going to have to go through. Not once. And I understand why I wasn't warned, because I probably would have chosen not to go through it. But so I sat down to write thinking I had no inspiration. I am completely empty. What am I going to write about? Sitting there with it was a yellow pad of paper and a pen. And then internally I heard, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." And so I'm like, okay, I'm going crazy. I'm going crazy. And I'm hearing a voice in my head. So I just wrote mommy, comma. And then my pen just went, and it was a message from Talia. Even though she was 31 days old, so she didn't have languaging skills, but the soul is ageless. So this was a message directly from her soul. And Amy, I knew it did not come from me. I knew it came through me because of what I felt. And it was then that I made a decision. I want more of this. I want to, because it was the only thing that had brought me peace. So that's when I started writing more in that way, connecting with her energy in spirit, writing with God, having these conversations with God. And then I made a decision. I want to know everything there is to know about death, about spirit, about the other side. And that's when I started sitting in spirit circle. I went to England and did some intensive training and found that I had an ability to see and hear and feel things that most people didn't. So it's been 30 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a pretty amazing journey. And I honestly don't know how anybody goes through loss or grief without some sort of a spiritual connection. Because when you try to do it from your own mind is going to regurgitate everything you've been taught, everything that you think you know, and yet the wisdom of spirit holds truth, and it holds perspective, one that is peaceful. So that's my story.
That's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
And I know that automatic writing is something that you do a lot and teach other people to do. And it's something that you shared very publicly when your mother was dying and going through the conversations with her when she was alert and oriented and then when she wasn't.
So
And
there was, yeah. So I was even connecting with the energy of her soul the last week of her life. She was not conscious a lot, although she was the sweetest, most adorable woman. So I have four older sisters. So we were all like hunkered down at her house during that whole last week, and she was mostly unconscious. And then there were times we thought like, oh my God, this is her last moment. We're saying our goodbyes. Mom, we love you. We love you. And then maybe a couple seconds later, she'd pop her eyes open and say, am I still here? Is this a joke? Am I still here? She couldn't understand why she wasn't dying. And then she would be like, am I doing something wrong? And we're like, no, mom, no, this is just your body's going to be shutting down. And then but that happened like 3 times. We would say our goodbyes and then she would be like, what are you guys doing? I'm still here. But anyway, so I think it's possible to connect with anyone's soul, whether they're here with a body or on the other side. And yeah, she's an amazing force. She still is an amazing force.
mhm,
And that's when I hear or see people going through loss and they're just in that pain. I'm like, oh my God, what they don't know how close spirit is to them. They don't know that they can hear, that they can have another conversation. I hear a lot of times people will say, what gives me peace is I know someday I will see them again. I'm like, oh God, that just feels too far away. You don't have to wait until someday. You can have experiences with spirit right here and right now because they want to help us to heal. They want to have the conversations continue. So I love helping people bridge that gap.
and helping them to be open to experiences that they haven't been able to explain before.
Yeah.
Like as we're sitting here, I'm feeling pressure on my shoulders. Now, to me, that's Steve saying, I'm here, my hands are on your shoulders, I'm leading you. And there are other times that I'll hear a message from my dad or from my mom that I think before having the experience with the light in the bathroom, I don't know that I would have known to identify it as anything. I would have probably thought I was crazy. And I've done a lot of automatic writing. I do strategic meditation, also known as shamanic journeying
Cool.
without substance. I don't use any of the drugs or alcohol or anything like that. Just drum beats and getting into almost a trance. Um, and I laugh. I say, my memory is terrible. So if you expect me to just go through this vision and then tell you what I saw, not going to happen. However, I write as it's happening. I'm not really looking except to know that I'm on the paper and I'm not writing on top of the words that I just wrote. But, and the thoughts come and they go out my hand. I have no control over what gets written. And it's amazing to ask the questions and get them answered and to know that they didn't come from me because I wouldn't have known that answer. So it's amazing.
And you can tell the difference when it comes from you or when it comes from spirit because of the quality of it, like the energy that it comes through. Like I've been keeping diaries and journals ever since I was 5 years old. And most of my diaries and journals before I started tapping into the spiritual angelic realm, most of it was sort of ranting, or it could go anywhere from a gratitude to a rant. And that has a certain quality to it. Or it
Mhm.
was like, this is what scares me. But then when you start tuning into the realm of angels and God and spirit, it's never negative. It's always loving, always uh, compassionate, supportive. I don't always get the exact answer to this is what's going to happen, and I don't always use it for that. What I use my writing for is it brings me into a centered space where I can be okay enough in the not knowing, because I'm trusting. I may not know what the plan is, but I trust that there is a divine plan. And so that's what my meditation practice, that's what my writing practice does for me. It brings me out of this little monkey mind that can spin incessantly, and it brings me into my heart, which is, I call my heart, and my journal is my portal to God and my portal to spirit.
I think this is going to be a good time for us to take a few minute break, and we'll be right back.
Life quakes or life transitions and the aftershocks that follow are something we all experience. A life quake can stem from the heartbreaking grief that arises from the loss of a loved one, or the disorientation felt when life suddenly shifts due to the loss of a job, relationship, identity, or health challenge. Learning to navigate these transitions with mindfulness, grace, and self-compassion is the key to finding your way back to joy, happiness, and inner peace. Advanced Grief Recovery Method Specialist and Certified Life Transition Coach Amy Lindner Lesser, MSW, expertly supports clients to navigate their life quakes and transitions with warmth, kindness, and grace. Learning to accept support as you navigate your way through the aftershocks is one of the most powerful gifts you can give yourself. Learn more at introspection.com. That's introspection.com.
And we're back.
Amy, you just said something in that, during that break, not you, but in that break, what I heard was something about being open for support. That is huge. That is huge. As women, and again, I work mostly with women. Typically, women want to take care of everybody else, and we're givers and we're people pleasers, and we put ourselves on the back burner. And it is so important. And I find that loss can be such a breaking open moment to say, wait a minute, I've taken care of everybody else. Maybe it's time to take care of me. Maybe it's okay for me to ask for help. Maybe it's okay for me to ask for space if that's what I need. Maybe it's okay for me to really share how I'm feeling. I just had this conversation. So I have a community on Facebook called the Spiritual Grief Sisterhood. It's a free community that's open to any woman that's gone through a loss. We were just having this conversation the other day about how going through loss it's sort of a calling. It calls to you. It calls something out of you. It calls this to me, it calls forth a spiritual connection. It calls forth a need for deeper healing. Like, I can't tell you how many women that I work with who say they want to get a message from spirit, and I'm hearing, oh my God, they need so much healing in their life. And so just giving them a message from spirit sometimes to me feels like a Band-Aid that I'm putting on, to a wound that just needs really, really healing. And so I said this to someone the other day. I said, what if you knew that this woman had lost a baby. I said, what if you knew that this loss was really an invitation to heal your life?
I believe, first of all, I believe that change causes loss. Any relationship that changes, if it's a meaningful relationship and it changes, it's loss. It causes grief. As a society, we do a really poor job with allowing people to express the more difficult emotions like grief and anger and sadness and depression. We just try to bury it under something else, like, man up.
Yeah.
Big guys don't cry. You'll get another dog, or you're young, you'll marry again. You're young, you'll have another child. Well, nothing is going to replace
Right.
the relationship that you lost.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you can't have another wonderful relationship, but it will never be that relationship again. And I believe that each one of those losses can be a gift, that there are silver linings to everything.
Yep.
And I just wrote a chapter in a grief book called The Alchemy of Loss, which is, taking those bitter, difficult lessons and finding what the positive and the
Yeah.
benefit is. And especially as women, I think we live our lives up to a certain point, pleasing everybody else.
Mhm.
We become whatever career we have because it's what our parents told us to do, or our spouse. We take up sports because that's what our spouse does, not necessarily because we like it. I became an innkeeper because that's what made my husband really happy. That's what he really wanted to do. It's not that I didn't want to do it or I didn't enjoy it. I was perfectly happy being the director of geriatric services for hospitals. I didn't need to change what I was doing. And so when I look at each of my losses, it's like, okay, so what did I learn? When Steve passed, it took me a while, but I learned, number one, I could live on my own. I didn't need to be surrounded by somebody all the time. And as an only child, it was something that was very difficult for me to learn. I learned that I really was a lot stronger than I ever gave myself credit for because I was so busy putting myself, I don't want to say down, making myself quieter so that I didn't show him up. I wanted to make him look better. How ridiculous is that? To hide who I am to make somebody
Well,
else look better.
I would imagine it's what you saw maybe growing up, or
Probably.
what was taught, what was modeled, because we typically will follow in that pattern of what we were conditioned to think or believe or to see.
And
And
in
I
the
think,
60s, that was how women
yeah,
behaved.
yeah,
Men were, they were the ones who supposedly had the front facing whatevers.
yeah.
So it
That
was
that just sounded like my mom. What my mother used to say, "Whatevers." She used to say that all the time, the whatevers. Wow. And we grew up watching my mom dote on my dad. She adored him, and she was a very loving, doting mom and wife. And so, you know, as an independent woman, for me, it's like I have to I struggle with that thinking like, "Ooh, should I be doting on him more?" And it's like, "Well, no, he can do this for himself." I
uh-huh.
love doing things for Kenny. Can we go back to something that you just said
Yep.
about the emotions? And I agree. I think our society has not done a great job on supporting um, grieving. And I want to take it one step further too, Amy. The women that I talk to, a lot of times, what I'm realizing about them is sometimes they don't have the words for what they're feeling. And what I'm seeing is, like, if you didn't see your parents expressing in a healthy way certain emotions, you learn as a young kid, okay, these are emotions that I shouldn't be doing, whether it's anger or sadness, right? I hear this all the time from the women that I'm working with and talking to. And so then when grief happens, you don't really have a healthy way to express that anger, so you might get stuck in it, or you might not be able to really touch the edges of your deep sadness
Or you
because
bury it
or you
with
bury it or you tuck it away
food
from
or alcohol or drugs or
yeah
whatever.
yeah. And I also hear that I have other kids I have to take care of, or I have to be the strong one for everybody else, so the grief gets put on hold, but it doesn't go away, it goes underground. And so part of my work is supporting women and learning how to have a relationship with their anger. And how do you have a relationship with your sadness? And what do you do with the fear that's underneath it all? Because fear is what's at the root of all of that, all of those emotions of grief, fear is at the root of it. And so, again, most people haven't been taught what to do with fear. So we run from it, we numb it, we hide it, we make believe it's not there. But I have found in my own life and in the work that I do is when we can look at that and look at it with God or higher power, source, whatever you want to call that energy for you, you get a different idea about it. Like for me, for instance, anytime I get afraid, I will go into my conversation with God and I'll say, God, here's this thing that I'm afraid of. Should I be afraid of this? And not once has God ever said to me, oh, Sandy, you should be very afraid of that. Like my mind is telling me all the reasons why this is scary. But when I bring it to the energy of God, that the mind of God, the perspective of God, it unravels it for me. And then I get to be with whatever is there. And that's where my healing happens every single time.
One of the things that a coach I worked with taught was that if you're in the present moment, in the here and now, there is nothing to fear. Fear is your ego, your monkey mind, projecting all of the what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all make believe because they may never come to happen. And our ego is there because it protected us from the saber-toothed tigers. Well, they're not around anymore. We don't need the ego to protect us like that, but it wants to keep us safe and not changing. So we have to learn to embrace the uncertainty and say, okay, what if something better were to happen from this? What if I'm so wrong, I'm 180 degrees wrong? And for me, when I start to come back to the present and realize that what I'm afraid of isn't happening now, it relieves so much pressure and so much fear that I can take steps and keep going forward.
So do you know what the ego is afraid of, Amy?
Other than change?
The ego is afraid of its own death. The ego is afraid of ego death. And ego death to me is I surrender everything and I am in flow and I am living from that place fully connected with God and spirit and trusting. When we're in that space, there is no ego, right? And like you said, the ego is there to protect. I have also found that the ego is something that we have created when we were kids to like a buffer, like a protection. And it also, so this is, let me take a moment and explain what I mean. When we're born, I believe we are all born beautiful and whole and pure and loving essence. We are the essence of the divine that has just taken on this mushy, squishy baby form. And then as we grow, we go through certain situations in our life as a young child, and situations that could hurt, situations that can feel painful or bring out these emotions. And we start to create a story at a very young age. And the story might sound something like, this was my fault. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. And the what if negative. And so when we have these stories and these emotions, as we grow, we typically don't want people to see all that stuff. So we put on a layer. That's the ego. That's what the ego is protecting, all of that stuff from coming out. So the ego says, oh, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm good. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Right. So the ego is going to try and protect you from feeling some of those deeper feelings and looking at some of those stories. So then life happens again as you're older. And now it's giving you an opportunity to break open. But if you're not ready or willing to do that, you're going to put a whole nother layer of protection. And that whole other layer, that next layer of protection can look like an addiction. It can look like excess weight. It can look like a sense of isolation. It can look like just a pretend face to the world. It can look like all of that, like this extra armor. No, I'm good. I can tell you I'm strong, But if you see what I'm really like over here, you'll see something different, right? That's the next layer of protection. So here's what happens next. That beautiful energy of light that you are created as is actually calling out. It's your soul calling out to the universe saying, hey, I need this light back. I want to feel my light again. And so it's putting out a call to the universe. How can I how can I see my light again? How can I remember who I really am? And from that call, we will bring into our lives something that will break us open. And that could look like a divorce. It could look like a job ending. It could look like a loss, a death of a loved one, any of the kind of losses that you talked about. And then there's a big crack coming in, because life is trying to break us open so that we can move through the layers that we've created, so that we can come back to that essence of life that we are. What is that?
Rich, we'll cut that out. That was just my dog who woke up and walked out of the room.
Wow.
He was breaking it open and cracking and dragging his chain.
So does that make sense? So we're,
Definitely.
I believe every one of us is on a journey, and the purpose is, how can I live from that place of light again? And all of these losses are an opportunity, if you do the deeper work, to work through those layers, to work through the emotions, and to understand them, to understand the stories that you created, because underneath all of that is your light.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
That is. So, with all of your talents and all of your interests, what is the thing that lights you up the most now?
Mm-hmm. Wow. You mean work-wise or personal-wise?
Yes. Because I don't believe that you can really separate a person.
Yeah. So my kids light me up, Ariana and Tia. And Ariana is expecting her first baby in October.
Exciting. Congratulations.
That's exciting. In my personal life, so it's my kids, in my family, anything creative. I love playing the piano. I love writing songs on the piano.
Okay. You love playing the piano.
I love playing the piano. I love creating songs on the piano. I love painting. I love doing any kind of DIY projects. In my professional life, I love supporting women, helping them through loss, and helping and teaching them about how to bring healing to their stories that they've created, how to do that deeper work, and how to get connected to God and spirit. It's my passion. It's my passion. And I love it.
Something you could do forever without getting tired and without being paid.
It doesn't feel like, it honestly does not feel like work to me. I love teaching. I love sharing what spirit has given to me, whether it's writing it in book form, or it's speaking to groups, doing videos, my podcast. Yeah. Anything that has to do with creating, expressing, and being a voice for God and spirit, to put it in a nutshell.
I like for being the voice.
Thank you. How about you, Mimi? What lights you up?
My crazy dog and my cats. Talking to wonderful people like you and my other guests. Working with, again, predominantly women, helping them see that there are silver linings and that they can be a completely new and even better version of themselves once they've gotten to the other side of the grief. I mean, the grief will never completely go away, and it finds a place to sort of be, so that you can think about it. It's like, in some ways, it's like wearing glasses. when you first get glasses, you're constantly aware, oh, they're here, or did I remember to put them on, or whatever. And then when you're wearing them for a long time, you don't even remember that you're
Mm,
wearing them. And it's just, oh, this is allowing me to see better. And I think that's what grief does too. It allows you to see things with new lenses.
that's beautiful.
So I love that. I love working with women and men on the non-death losses also,
Mm,
because I think we tend to really minimize the importance of them in our lives. And, I've worked with people who've gone through gender reassignment surgery and the families and their grief that's
oh,
not,
yeah.
that's not usually addressed. Um, I've worked with women going through infertility and grieving the loss of the future dream, through job loss or job change, where, especially in our society, we think of our entire identity is around our jobs, our social lives, more than 40 hours a week in most cases. And if you lose a job or you leave a job, you're leaving behind an awful lot more. And even the things that people say, oh, I can't be grieving over that. I got married. Well, but you changed your relationship as a single person, whether you moved from your parents' home or a home with a roommate into a home with a partner. That's a huge change. You're not alone anymore. You now have to at least communicate where you are and what you're doing for the other person. Yeah, they can be wonderful changes, and
Mhm.
yet there's still grief.
Yep. So, and we can take turns on this. What do you think is the common denominator, the common thread for all of those kinds of losses? What's the common thread if you see one?
For the non-death losses or every
Any
loss?
any kind of loss, whether it's a job loss, pet loss, spousal loss, loss of a child, loss of a relationship, um, any kind of anything under that umbrella of loss. What do you feel is the common thread?
Change and shaking the solid foundation, or at
Mm,
least what we thought was a solid foundation.
I
Um,
love that. I love that. I think I would see it as change, and I think I would see it as it's a huge opportunity for growth and healing, even though it doesn't feel like it, even though it's like probably feeling like the most painful thing that you're going through. And I know when I've been in pain, I haven't been able to see the growth in that moment.
no,
I have,
you need to get some distance from it, which
Mhm.
is why, I say to people, I can't talk to you and help you if you're just going through it.
Yeah.
You need to get some distance. And it depends on what the change is, how much distance.
Hmm.
The loss of a child or of a spouse needs a little bit more distance than the loss of a job. Um, but whatever it is, it is. And there will come a time where staying where you are in your misery becomes more painful than the idea of changing. And that's when it's time to start working with people like you and me.
Yeah. And I want to make I want to offer this to anyone who's listening who is in the beginning stages of any kind of loss. I just want to offer something to them that it's important to breathe. And if you can't find it in yourself to know that you're going to be okay, borrow my idea, borrow Amy's idea of at some point you are going to be okay. Amy and I are a little bit further down the path than you might be right now, but we've been where you're at, maybe not in the same exact situation, but the similarity is it hurts, and we want you to know it can hurt less.
Exactly. There is a way out.
Yeah.
You do have to go through it,
Yep.
but there is a way out.
Yeah.
Sandy, thank you so much.
Welcome, Amy. Thank you.
For our viewers who want to learn more about you or to find you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So 2 ways. They can either go to my website, which is sandyalemian.com, or they can find me on Facebook through the Spiritual Grief Sisterhood.
Great. Thank you so much. It's great to see you. Thank you for being with me today.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Everybody, we'll see you the next time. If you liked what you heard on this podcast and want to hear more, please follow us and tell your friends. You can also find me on Facebook at Amy Lindner Lesser, Grief to Growth Life Coaching, and on LinkedIn at Amy Lindner Lesser. Thanks again for listening.